Andre the Giant finally broke his silence before his death, revealing the wrestlers he detested the most for years. The gentle giant was well known for his extravagant persona both inside and outside the ring, but beneath the stories and his towering presence were grievances, grudges, and names that he kept hidden until the very end. Who did Andre despise the most, and what caused this rare outburst? Was it jealousy, disrespect, or something else entirely? Well, he hated Randy Savage, and he hated him intensely. Let's discover the explosive confessions that Andre made just before he passed away, exposing the grudges he carried throughout his life. Not for the reasons you might think, but for a very specific, very personal reason. Randy Savage's silky sheen, Macho Man, and oil that he wore like armor in every match drove Andre crazy. It's easy to forget how uncomfortable life can be for a man of Andre's size, as showers and hotels weren't built for someone who was over 7 feet tall and weighed over 500 pounds. After each exhausting match, Andre would struggle to get clean, but when he stepped into the ring, flared up like he was getting ready for a bodybuilding show, it made the Giant's life even more difficult. It meant another exhausting, nearly impossible scrub down, and Andre wasn't just irritated, he was angry. Savage's own brother, Lanny Powell, acknowledged that Randy knew Andre hated it, and everyone knew it, but Randy wouldn't back down. Andre's gimmick was being a giant. Once, he snapped mine as baby oil to Randy. Making an exception for Andre was a slippery slope. If I made one for him, he argued, I'll have to make one for everybody. He was stubborn, determined, and possibly even a little defiant, but in Andre's world, that kind of attitude didn't win you any favors, especially when it meant making an already difficult life worse. If he didn't like you, you would know, because he would rough you up in the ring and make you earn every bump. He didn't play games. When Randy refused to give up the baby oil, Andre stopped throwing punches. Their matches were stiff, and their backstage interactions were colder than a hotel tile floor. Even though Randy had the courage to stand his ground, it came at a price. He was a very big, very strong, very French man who cost 9 Hulk Hogan. The reason Andre the Giant didn't like Hulk Hogan is because he came from a time when wrestling was revered and guarded like a generational secret. Hogan, on the other hand, was loud, young, and, at least in Andre's eyes, disrespectful. He was flamboyant, self-assured, and he thought he could be just as big and strong as the Giant himself. Did not view Hogan as a peer, but rather as a young man acting tough in a business he did not yet understand, so he beat him up, not in a friendly showbiz manner, but making sure he felt every bump and every slam as a way of saying, you don't belong here yet. Hogan later acknowledged that Andre had no tolerance for his conceit and no patience for someone who hadn't paid their dues. He said, I had fun beating on me, but Andre wasn't some bitter old giant, but he simply loved the business too much to let anyone walk in and turn it into a circus. When he started learning, things started to change, but the tension remained. By the time WrestleMania 3 rolled around, Hogan was the biggest star in the business, with the attention of the fans and merchandise, but behind the scenes, he was still terrified of the one man who could make or break that moment, Andre. Andre wasn't someone you crossed by accident, and he was so nervous before the match that he actually wrote down how he wanted it to go, which was unprecedented at the time. If Andre had known that Hogan scripted the match, Hogan himself said there would have been a red and yellow blood spot in the ring. Andre knew this was his last big run, so he decided to pass the torch, not because he suddenly fell in love with Hogan, but because he respected the moment and maybe finally respected the man. According to Bobby Heenan, Andre's manager during that match, if Andre had wanted to crush Hogan in the ring that night, he would have had 8 Big John Stud. If there was one man who really tried Andre the Giant's patience repeatedly, it was Big John Stud. He wasn't subtle either. He went around telling people he was going to be the new Giant, even starting to take growth hormones because size alone could crown him for Andre. That was an insult. Coming for his throne, you might as well spit on the legacy he established in one notorious match in Demo, Iowa, where Stud crossed a line that had nothing to do with fists or promos. That may seem like a small thing, but in the unwritten code of wrestling, that was Andre's move, his symbol, and his moment. He had repeatedly and politely told Stud not to do it, but Stud continued to do it. That night, Andre snapped, beating the man so badly that Stud picked up his bags, left the locker room, and didn't return. Perhaps Andre never thought about it, and if you've ever wondered if the animosity was reciprocal, let's say Stud learned to keep his distance. Surpass him, but when you're surrounded by a 500-pound mountain of rage and pride, that kind of talk tends to end quickly. 7 Kamala. At first glance, you'd think that Andre and Kamala were destined to battle it out in arenas across the nation, but behind the scenes, Andre didn't like Kamala. It began in 1982, when Kamala and James Harris were still getting started in the business. In his first match with Andre the Giant, something went wrong, a mistake, which happens all the time in wrestling, but Andre didn't handle it gracefully. He called Kamala a dumb sob in the middle of the ring, loud and sharp, and then he came at him, so Kamala fought back. That was only the first night. Kamala arrived the following night with a script, no performance, and no fists flying. It was no longer about wrestling, it was now personal. When Kamala entered Andre's dressing room with 357 Magnum in his pocket, he pointed at the Giant's nose with his finger while resting his hand on the gun for protection. You would think that Andre would have defended himself, but as soon as Kamala stepped up, his hands flew into the air, and he grinned broadly and said, "Sorry boss, I didn't mean it." He backed down not because Kamala was bigger, but because he was finished playing. After that, things changed, and Andre was never hostile toward Kamala again. Kamala made it clear in later years that Andre wasn't the kind giant that people loved on television. Instead, he had a nasty attitude. Kamala said that Andre was temperamental, rude to the fans, and rude to the boys. Although they eventually worked matches across the nation, their respect was tense, and Kamala didn't really trust him. Instead, he kept that gun close by in case the Giant snapped again. Andre may not have hated Kamala after that, but it's safe to say that he never forgot it either. Perhaps it taught him something, or perhaps it just scarred his pride. The Ultimate Warrior was a living example of everything that was wrong with the direction wrestling was going. He was loud, reckless, unteachable, and most disrespectful. It was about how he treated the ring and, more importantly, the people in it. By the time they shared a ring, Andre was in pain, his body was failing him, his back was in a mess, and his knees were barely hanging on, but he still showed up and performed because that's what professionals did. However, the Ultimate Warrior blasted through matches like a bull on fire, showing no regard for his opponent's safety. He hit hard, moved quickly, and didn't slow down, even when Andre told him to. Except for one of their early house show runs, when the Ultimate Warrior became reckless and slammed into Andre without warning, stiff and wild. According to stories that circulated through the locker room like ghost stories, the Giant knocked the Ultimate Warrior down with a single blow to remind him that being jacked and painted up like a comic book hero didn't mean a thing if you couldn't respect the business or the man who paved the way. In some cities, they tried to hide it with squash matches, which were 10-second bouts in which Andre hardly had to move. He detested those too, but not nearly as much as he detested spending real ring time with the Ultimate Warrior. If 10 seconds spared him 2 minutes of chaos, he took the 10. The Ultimate Warrior and Andre the Giant had a complicated relationship with many people in the wrestling world, but with Hacksaw Jim Duggan, it was personal in a different way. It wasn't pure hatred like he reserved for the Ultimate Warrior or Big John Studd, but that didn't mean there weren't moments of genuine annoyance, because if there's one thing Andre didn't like, it was chaos, and with Duggan's 2x4 waving flag, there were moments of genuine annoyance. It's strange that the hatred didn't seem reciprocal, at least not openly. You see, Andre the Giant detested uncertainty, especially when it came from someone who didn't know how to pace themselves in the ring. He could be giving and could make someone better in a single moment, but he had to want to help Duggan. Early in his career, Duggan was just another loudmouth wearing a mask. In Hawaii, he was competing against the most feared man in the industry. Andre didn't have time for inexperienced fighters. Duggan had no idea what he was doing, and he admitted it himself, but he survived that match, and Andre oddly remembered him years later. The Giant's ring. It was a moment that could have gone wrong in a lot of ways, but it didn't, because by then, Duggan had earned something few could: Andre's tolerance, maybe even a little respect. That didn't mean Andre went easy on him. One night, after knocking Hacksaw to the mat, Andre climbed to the ropes and, with a mischievous grin, dropped all 500 pounds on him. He sat down like a wrecking ball and simply flattened the man. Bobby Heenan screamed for it, and Duggan never forgot it. However, the most famous moment between them was probably when Duggan struck the Giant with the 2x4. It was the only time Andre was knocked out in the ring. Blood was streaming from Duggan's lip, and Andre's thumb accidentally split it open, and in that mess of pain and adrenaline, Duggan found his footing, swung the wood, and made history. Did Hacksaw Jim Duggan hate Andre the Giant? No, he was in awe of him. In fact, the scar beneath his mustache serves as a reminder of that gratitude. He played cards with Andre, traveled with him, and knew the lonely man behind the myth, the guy who couldn't fit in airplane seats, couldn't hide in a crowd, and couldn't go anywhere without being stared at. Dugan didn't freely offer friendships, but he grew closer than most for Bam Bam Bigelow, and the Giant hated him because he thought he was the superstar, the one who transcended wrestling, whose presence in a room could silence even the loudest egos. Throwing his weight around the locker room didn't sit well with the Giants, and he didn't just talk about it, he did it. One night at Madison Square Garden, Bigelow thought he was going to work a normal match, but Andre had other ideas. Bret Hart, who was watching the fight, said that Andre had other plans, and he got his hands on Bigelow and almost killed him. Bigelow's ego was deflated like a cheap beach ball, and Andre stomped out any dreams he had of being top dog. Bigelow didn't exactly keep quiet about the incident years later in shoot interviews. He characterized Andre as a big, mean, smelly giant who, in his words, tried to kill him in the ring. He also related the famous story of Bad News Allen being literally sat on by Andre, who, after a long day of drinking tequila and Clamato, couldn't contain his laughter. However, you could still hear the lingering bitterness in his voice as he recounted the incident with laughter. This was because, unlike many wrestlers who looked up to Andre, Bam felt singled out, and the feeling wasn't reciprocated. Andre didn't spend his time plotting against him. If anything, Andre hardly acknowledged him outside of that MSG match. Andre Bam Bam was just another hot-headed rookie who needed to learn the ropes, but to Bigelow, Andre was a towering destructive force who literally left a mark. By the time Bigelow returned to WWF in the 1990s, more mature and professional, Andre was already dead, but the scars from their confrontation lingered in Bigelow's world. Andre was the giant who taught him the hardest lesson of his career, and in his world, Bam Bam Bigelow was just another name on a long list of wrestlers who forgot that in his ring, there was no room for ego, only respect. 3 Bad News Brown. On a long bus full of wrestling's biggest names, Andre was relaxed and chatty in the back, and he may not have meant to use the N-word for anyone in particular, but there was one person on that bus who didn't take the bad news lightly. His real name was Alan Coach, and he was a man who had built his life on discipline, strength, and pride. He didn't care if you were a 7-OOT French legend or a locker room deity, respect went both ways. When he heard Andre use that word, he got up and told the Giant, "You better watch your mouth," warning him. At first, Andre didn't say anything, but later, as the tension grew, he snapped, "Go F yourself." That was the wrong move. Brown demanded that the bus be pulled over immediately, and he was prepared to settle the matter face to face. Perhaps he realized the line. He may have crossed paths because he realized that Bad News wasn't bluffing. Hansen attempted to calm things down, realizing that he had never seen anyone talk to Andre like that before. The following morning, Bad News was waiting near the elevator, and when Andre stepped off, Brown was there, calm but ready. "Let's go outside," he said, and Andre didn't move, so they had a man-to-man conversation. Bad News told him bluntly, "I never insult your people, don't insult mine." Andre, the unbreakable giant, apologized then. The friendship was never fully restored, and the damage wasn't undone, but the respect was carved in stone. They kept their distance for years, the tension lingering like a bad. There was tension when Sheik entered the room, and when Andre was there, that tension could turn icy cold. The Sheik's loud, unpredictable personality made him a magnet for controversy even after his retirement, when his profanity-laced tweets, which were written by someone else, became internet gold. However, back in the ring, there was nothing funny about it for Andre Hulk Hogan, who witnessed it firsthand, and he once snapped and almost killed Sheik in 1993. Nevertheless, before Andre passed away in 1993, the two finally spoke, and whatever anger remained, they buried it too. There were rumors that Sheik's backstage antics, constant loudness, and possibly even his habits outside the ring irritated people. Andre wasn't known to explain himself. If he didn't like you, you'd know. Tom Pritchard, who spent years around both men. Heenan recalled how much Andre hated the way Sheik treated enhancement talent, the weekend warriors who entered the ring for a few extra bucks, and the love of the show. Sheik apparently saw them as punching bags, and Andre saw them as hard-working guys trying to make ends meet, and Sheik broke all three. Your guts. Sheik landed squarely in the latter camp, and if Andre didn't like you, he had a way of telling you that he might lay on you in the ring for a little too long and make you look foolish, or as legend has it, blow rancid breath in your face, or let one rip mid-hold one Jake the Snake Roberts. Andre the Giant was the man who could make Jake the Snake Roberts feel that the snake in his bag was the lesser threat. Jake Roberts didn't hate Andre, in fact, he adored him, but, let's just say that for a while, he wasn't very fond of him. Andre the Giant's size made him a spectacle everywhere he went, but in the ring, respect was his currency, and he didn't give it out cheaply. Ignore him, he erased him. It was the kind of match that makes the crowd fumble in their seats and mutter, "What the hell is this?" Jake got nothing, no move, no mercy, just the slow suffocating presence of 500 pounds making him feel like a mosquito buzzing against a wall. Jake was angry not only at the match, but also at the disrespect, because most wrestlers would have swallowed that anger knowing Andre had the power to split them in two with a flick, but Jake stormed into Andre's locker room, his face red, voice loud, and called the Giant out. Andre didn't toss him out, he didn't even shout, he just nodded, which was what he wanted all along to know that Jake Roberts had guts from that day on.